Hello, I'm Dr. Rostenberg, and I want to personally thank you for checking out my YouTube channel. Stay tuned at the end of the video, and I will give my recipe for your healing process. Now, I wish we could achieve our results with just diet and lifestyle alone, but supplements really do make the difference. And to help you with that, you'll have an opportunity to order supplements at a discounted rate. We'll see you then. Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Rostenberg again from BeyondMTHFR.com. Tonight's discussion is going to be a two-part video series around the gut origin of methylation problems. Now, many of you out there are aware that methylation is complicated. I'm not going to disagree with that. But what I want to do through this video series is give you some new information, some new ammunition to look at gut problems as the source of methylation imbalances. We cannot change our genes, but we can change how those genes express, and making sure your gut is healthy is critical for that process to take place. So the research that's coming out now is does a great job of pointing out the connection between our digestive system and the rest of our body. Our gut isn't just a place where we digest food. Our gut is a place where our body gets in contact with the outside world. There's an exchange of information in our gut. And so the microbes, the yeast, the bacteria that are normally present in our digestive system are there to help us get the nutrition out of our food, and as well as to communicate to our nervous system to tell us which genes to turn on and express. So we can do a genetic report and see which genes are going faster or slower, and that's good to do, but we also have to take note of what's happening in the gut and how that is influencing the activation of those genes as well. Now, the research is very clear that the gut microbes, the microorganisms in the gut, have a huge influence on our feelings of anxiety, mood, how well we think, if we have excess pain or not. And by changing the gut, making it more healthy, we can modulate or improve these conditions. That's not my opinion. That's what the research coming out right now is saying. I always like to point out that gut bacteria, yeast, E. coli, lactobacillus, clostridium, bacteria and fungus also have methylation cycles. They also make DNA. They also make and grow and repair their body. They make new parts. They have to, adapt to the environment quickly. And the methylation cycle allows them to do that. So when we take methylation vitamins, we are throwing fertilizer down our throat. I would like for everyone who takes vitamins and food to get the most out of that and to make sure that your body benefits from the vitamin, not something living in your gut. However, we have to make sure the gut is in a healthy working order so that that nutrition and that fertilizer that you're taking can get where it needs to go. So just remember, gut bugs have methylation cycles too. If you're taking methyl groups based off your genetic test and you're not getting better, or you're seeing your symptoms flare, you need to take note of what's happening in the gut, because that's likely where a large part of the problem lies. Now, SIBO is something I've spoken about before. Interested viewers can look up the two videos and the post I did on SIBO. It's real important for methylation. I'll show you that in the next slide. But SIBO is on the rise. It's basically a condition where bacteria that normally lives just in your colon has grown and proliferated up into your small intestine. This creates a situation of malnutrition and really makes methylation problems much worse, not to mention all the other problems that go along with being malnourished. People being on antibiotics and people taking proton-pump inhibitors are the main reasons why SIBO is on the rise. Those two classes of drugs more than anything else, are responsible for creating this epidemic of SIBO that we're seeing. SIBO does lots of things to your body. You can look at the data in the other videos I made. I just want to remind everyone that SIBO creates an imbalance in your methylation cycle mainly by causing an increase in folate and folic acid and in folate levels. It's important to know that your gut bacteria produce folic acid. Mankind synthesized it, but it's been in our bodies for a very long time because some gut bacteria produce it. Now, they also produce folate in the right form and the folic acid form. They produce all different kinds of B9. What you need to know is that when you have SIBO or a gut infection, there's too much bacteria, individuals get full of B9. At the same time, they get deficient in really critical nutrients like iron and magnesium and zinc and B12 and the fat-soluble vitamins and essential fatty acids. And so you get this imbalance. And so this is one reason why a lot of people with gut problems have overmethylation symptoms, because when your methylation cycle doesn't have the B12 and the other nutrients to make it work, and you just take a lot of folate, well, then you can just make a lot of neurotransmitters, and that causes you to have insomnia, anxiety, pain, and OCD, compulsive behaviors, headaches, etc. So just be aware that what grows and lives in your gut absolutely influences your methylation cycle. I've talked about it before in terms of SIBO. Today we're going to be talking about it a little bit differently. There's 4 genes that I think are very, very susceptible to what goes on in the gut, and these genes have a massive impact on our body. I think the argument could be made that the COMT gene influences our personality as much as anything else. COMT being red here, as shown on the MTHFR support report, basically means that COMT is slowed down. So the clearance of estrogen and the clearance of neurotransmitters like adrenaline and dopamine is reduced. This makes an individual very sharp, focused, detail-oriented, loves to solve problems, get things done, very good at keeping things in order when they're under a little bit of stress. But if you put a lot of chaos and stress into their life, they do tend to burn out and become overwhelmed, and that's because of the side effect of all this adrenaline. So the COMT is impacted that way. Now, what goes on in the gut absolutely can influence these genes. That's the main idea with this video today. It's going to influence the COMT, the MAOA, the MTR, and the sulfonyluretransferase. All 4 of these genetic SNPs are impacted by stuff that comes from the gut. What grows in our gut starts when we are born. We're born sterile, and the second we enter the world, we start getting gut bacteria. It comes from our mom's mouth, from the breast, from the skin, and from the birth canal. That's how it used to be. Now, things have changed a little bit. There's a lot of dental mercury, and women are sometimes, they're bottle feeding for different reasons. Sometimes a woman's unable to breastfeed. Too much bathing, too many harsh soaps and harsh cleaners. And then, there's now more C-sections going on for different reasons, some for convenience, but also because women are just not as healthy as they used to be, so it's harder to bring a baby to term. So all of these factors, plus early life antibiotics, begins to destroy and alter the microbiome that we depend on for health. And I believe this is the driving force behind why methylation problems are becoming such a big issue. It's actually gut issues are making people with methylation genes worse. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Just another perspective here on the gut bacteria. So it doesn't just come from the gut, it comes from all over the body. And the moral of the story with this is that each individual has their own gut signature, their own microorganism pattern that's unique to them. And you can see that in different parts of the body, as these pie charts show, there's just different bacteria in different parts of our body. It really is a fascinating study. More and more data is coming out now highlighting the connection between what goes on in the microbiological and the microbiome sphere and what happens in our body. So there really is this conversation between the bugs that live on us and the genes that work inside us. That is the big idea. And when our bugs are healthy, we're healthy. But conversely, when our bugs are sick, we are sick as well. And people with methylation problems, they tend to get the sickest for the longest period of time. I want to highlight that the liver is on the receiving end of all the fun stuff that happens in your gut. So when you eat right and you digest well and your stress is managed and you're sleeping great and you're taking life in stride and your body's really firing on all cylinders, your liver's working great. But what happens if your gut does have an infection? What happens if you aren't digesting your food and you have a gut infection or an imbalance of bacteria? Well, the literature is pretty crystal clear on this. The liver is the first place that all these gut products go. You can kind of see this is an artistic rendition of bugs. They're creating stuff that's leaking into our body, and things that they're making are aldehydes, ammonia, and phenols. We're going to really hit the phenols here in this first video, and we'll touch on the other products made from the gut on the second video. But just know that the liver gets overwhelmed with these molecules when there's too much imbalance in the gut. So this I pulled out of a recent piece of research. I don't expect you to be able to read this from where you're sitting, but what you need to know is this long list of chemical descriptions here of these different molecules. These are all phenolic compounds. These are phenols. Phenols you may be familiar with are resveratrol or quercetin or green tea. Okay, chocolate has phenols in there. So phenols come from plants and they come from bacteria and they have health benefits. No one can argue that green tea doesn't have health benefits or that resveratrol doesn't have health benefits. Absolutely important molecules. But what we need to recognize is that phenols are going to be metabolized or broken down by genes in our body that are already going slow. So if the COMT system is slowed down and we're being exposed to a lot of phenols from our gut bacteria, it's going to slow down the clearance of estrogen, potentially leading to hormone symptoms like fibroids or endometriosis or very severe bleeding or clotting or PMS. Or it could also lead to anxiety and pain and insomnia and OCD-like behavior because the inability to break down dopamine and adrenaline. Now these are just hypotheticals. They're things that we see in our practice. But just know that the phenols, which are healthy in some amount, if they get into your body in high amounts, they're going to cause problems. Again, bacteria in our gut produces phenols. It's normal, it's healthy, just like drinking a little bit of water. 8 glasses of water a day is healthy, right? But drinking 38 glasses of water is not. So the same issue applies with these phenolic compounds from our gut. A little bit, healthy and good. If you have too much leaking in from your gut, you're going to have an imbalance in your methylation cycle. We're talking about Clostridium and Bifidobacterium and E. coli and other bacteria that we normally have, that we should have, that we have that are involved in gut infections. These bacteria produce phenols, and guess what? We are going to be exposed to phenols. We have to get rid of them, but they're going to put pressure on genes that are already going too slow. Therein lies the problem. Just as a quick reminder, we break down epinephrine, adrenaline, dopamine in a very similar way. It has to go through the COMT gene shown here. So remember, the down arrow means it's going slower. So the reduced function of COMT, that's what we're genetically born with. So if we have a lot of phenols that we have to detox, they're going to sit in the parking space. They're going to take up that parking space that epinephrine was supposed to sit in. And so we're going to be exposed to higher levels of epinephrine over a longer period of time. That, my friends, can cause many of the symptoms that individuals with methylation problems are dealing with, especially the anxiety, the insomnia, just the inability to calm down the body, the fight or flight dominance. And I show this to you just to let you know that one way or the other, dopamine, epinephrine has to go through COMT on its way out of your body. So anything that slows down COMT is going to make a genetic SNP more problematic. We've known for at least 40 years that phenols slow down the COMT system. So this is benzoic acid. Benzoic acid is a type of phenol. It's produced in our gut. It soaks into our body every day. And if you have too much gut bacteria producing these phenols because you have an imbalanced gut and your digestion is not optimized, neither will be your methylation cycle. So here's the connection between phenols, a benzoic acid coming in from your gut, slowing down and inhibiting a gene that's already going too slow, an enzyme that's already going too slow. That's going to make an imbalance in the body and cause symptoms. Another study shows the same thing. A type of phenolic compound inhibits the COMT gene. So guys, it's not my opinion, it's just the research that one reason, just like these trucks are bottlenecking here in this horrible mess, this is like our biochemistry. So we're already born with the bottleneck when you're born with SNPs that have different color on your report. That's a SNP that's not optimum. And in the terms of COMT, it's going too slow. In terms of MeOA, it's going too slow. And the sulfonyluretransferase, the SULT, it's also going too slow. We can't change our genes, but we can change what our genes are required to do, how much work they have to do. And so if your gut's unhealthy, you're going to have phenols pumping into your system like trucks on this road. They just keep coming, and so the bottleneck gets worse. Now what you need to do is treat your gut. And we have a program in my office that takes as little as 10 days to restore the digestive health of your body, and we have seen very rapid improvements in chronic cases by treating the gut first. It's just a wise and very effective place to start. Here's a recent study talking about the sulfonyluretransferase systems, the SULT genes. You'll find at the end of your report when you do your genetic report. And again, these commonly eaten foods: onions, apples, peanuts, chocolate, green tea, red wine, olive oil. Good food, healthy food, contains phenols. They will slow down the sulfonyluretransferase gene. So if your gut is producing too many phenols, it can greatly impact your methylation cycle. I've had patients who have not been able to leave their house because of the anxiety that they feel. They've had to go on disability because of this. And by working on their gut in about 4 to 5 weeks, I have seen these patients spending multiple days in theme parks surrounded by thousands of people, making memories with their family like, the last 5 years of their life didn't even happen. So we've seen incredible turnaround by treating the gut. We treat methylation problems every day, but I want you to recognize that the gut is a huge player. And this is just part 1. We're going to follow up more on part 2 here shortly. I want to thank you for listening and spending your time with me on the computer. Methylation is a very rewarding subject, but it's a very important one. And methylation makes individuals more sensitive to environmental toxins, to stress, and certainly to an imbalanced gut. So if you or someone you know is dealing with a chronic methylation problem showing up as anxiety or insomnia, pain, a syndrome that doesn't fit normal diagnosis, then you're likely looking at a methylation problem, and you owe it to yourself and to your loved ones to look at your gut as well and make sure that the gut is working. So if you have questions about that, please reach out. I can help you figure that out. Please check out my website, BeyondMTHFR.com, and have a wonderful night. Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Rostenberg again from BeyondMTHFR.com. This is the second and final video in a series titled Gut Origin of Methylation Problems. Now, the reason I'm putting this video together is to share with you the idea that what goes on in your digestive tract can influence the expression of your genes and the function of your biochemistry. And the takeaway with this whole thing is when individuals who do genetic testing find out that they have a slowed methylation cycle or an impaired detoxification cycle or some phase 1 or phase 2 detox issues, lots of different things can come up. When you take supplements for those problems and you get worse or your symptoms exacerbate or get, flare up, what you're likely dealing with is a gut problem that hasn't yet been addressed. And as you go through the slides in these two videos and read the blog post, you'll see that the gut has an absolutely huge influence on how our genes, methylation genes, and detox pathways are functioning. So just a quick review from last video, we're talking about the idea that what happens inside the gut influences our body, and certainly it influences the liver very heavily. So the gut produces aldehydes, which we'll talk about. We've already spoken about phenols, and we're also going to talk about right now an important part of the gut, products from the gut that are aromatic amino acids. Now, you may have heard of aromatic amino acids. I bet you have. You've probably heard of tryptophan. People eating turkey at Thanksgiving, they get tired because of all the tryptophan in their food. That's at least the urban legend. That's not exactly how it works, but regardless, you've heard of tryptophan. You've likely heard of tyrosine. You've likely heard of phenylalanine. It's true that we can take these in supplements, and we use those in our office all the time with patients. But it's important to realize that your gut bacteria produces these amino acids also. Yes, your gut bacteria produce the same vitamins that you take in supplements. So it's possible then that the bacteria, if it's imbalanced and if there's an overabundance of one type of bacteria, or there's an infection where there's just way too much bacteria, that you could in fact have an individual with an excess of aromatic amino acids. So this is saying that all kinds of different probiotics can make tryptophan. They can make tryptophan that helps us make serotonin, it helps us make melatonin, it helps us sleep and have positive feelings, and certainly keeps our brain and nervous system working well. We can look at another slide that highlights this again. So this is called the shikimate pathway. So the shikimate pathway exists in plants. It exists in the bacteria in our gut. And here you can see through the complex chemistry that you end up with tyrosine, phenylalanine, and tryptophan. So what this says is that in bacteria, fungi, and plants, the three aromatic amino acids are synthesized from the common precursor from the shikimate pathway. And what this really means to you, whether you're a patient or just a curious individual or a doctor or researcher, is that when individuals have symptoms of overmethylation, anxiety, pain, inflammation, insomnia, or some sort of other manifestation of an imbalanced methylation system, you have to look at the gut, because the gut could be producing an enormous amount of tyrosine or phenylalanine that's the precursor to dopamine and adrenaline, for example. So someone could have high levels of adrenaline in their body because they have the COMT gene, because they have phenol exposure imbalance, and then you throw in on top of that a lot of tyrosine, you're throwing fuel onto that fire. So it's important to recognize that the products from the gut, in this case the aromatic amino acids, can turn into neurotransmitters. So yes, your gut produces the precursors of your neurotransmitters. The gut-brain connection in scientific form. So we'll look again. You can see I'm just showing you some background here that the aromatic amino acids are where we get dopamine and serotonin from. So it's not my opinion, it's the scientific fact that tryptophan and tyrosine become serotonin and dopamine respectively. So here's your evidence that what goes on in the gut influences your brain. Now, I would say that in individuals with an overabundance of gut bacteria, someone with SIBO or a gut infection, the problem that they may have is that they're getting way too much tryptophan and way too much tyrosine in their body. That would be just the logical consequence of having too much bacteria. But there's another problem that we're seeing show up now, and that has to do with Roundup and GMO foods. I used to think the problem with GMO was the fact that they were using viruses and combining DNA in very strange ways. My opinion has changed. My opinion is that GMO foods are dangerous because of the Roundup and the glyphosate inside them. That's where the real damage is occurring. And so glyphosate, aka Roundup, blocks the shikimate pathway. So I just showed you how the shikimate pathway produces tryptophan, phenylalanine, and tyrosine. Glyphosate blocks that, and that's how it kills weeds and living things. It kills them because it makes it impossible for these plants and weeds and to produce these amino acids that are needed to survive. And so this becomes important when we look at autism. This wonderful researcher here, Dr. Stephanie Seneff, she has done some groundbreaking research, and what you're looking at is the yellow bars here are the number of children and individuals diagnosed with autism, overlaid with the use of glyphosate in corn and soy. So, correlation is not causation, but it should definitely get your attention that there's something going on between the poisoning of our gut bacteria and the rates of autism. And so the argument is that because Roundup and the GMO chemicals they're using to kill all these weeds, that they're not toxic to humans. Well, it's true that our body itself doesn't have the shikimate pathway, but the bacteria that live in our gut, as I've shown you, do. And we need to take care of our microbiome, not assault it with these toxic chemicals that do all kinds of things. Now, Dr. Stephanie Seneff has published over 170 peer-reviewed journal articles. She's an MIT PhD scientist. She believes that in 10 years, half of all children will be autistic. And when you look at what glyphosate does to the body, it mimics a lot of the things we see in autism: low zinc, iron deficiency, low sulfate, seizures, and mitochondrial disorders. So that's a wake-up call for all of us. Steer clear of the GMOs. Now, we've talked about phenols in the previous video. We've just got done talking about aromatic amino acids. I want to share with you another aspect of what happens in our gut, and we're going to talk about aldehydes. Everybody listening has probably heard of formaldehyde. It's a toxic, cancer-causing chemical. Well, we also produce aldehydes that are similar to formaldehyde inside of our body, and aldehydes are indeed toxic. Our body has to take measures to detoxify the aldehydes from our system, otherwise it can cause problems. So acetaldehyde is a carcinogenic product of alcohol fermentation and metabolism in microbes, aka the gut, associated with cancers of the upper digestive tract. And we know that Candida albicans, yeast, can produce high levels of acetaldehyde from sugar when there's low oxygen. So what this means is, in your gut, in my gut, and everyone's gut, if the gut is unhealthy, there can be fungal species, Candida and other yeasts, that are producing and fermenting your sugars into alcohol and aldehyde, and essentially making us sick that way. So just more research proving, here's the gut, you've got the aldehyde production, I've circled it, showing up in our colonic environment and other parts of our gut, and these aldehydes leak into our body and they interfere with the breakdown of our neurotransmitters. Again, the whole idea with this whole video series is to show you that what's coming in from the gut is slowing down genes that are already going slower. So the gut is influencing the genetic expression by inhibiting what's already inhibited. And this is where people are, in my opinion, getting really frustrated with their methylation support, with their protocols that they're doing. You're taking really good supplements, but you're not seeing anything change. And that's because you've got to get to the source of where the problem is, and you've got to clean up the gut to get these aldehydes and phenols and aromatic amino acids into balance. So this is basically just proving again that Candida produces aldehydes that can cause cancer, and if it's strong enough to cause cancer, believe me, it's strong enough to screw up your methylation cycle. So more data here on the ethanol side. So I mentioned that the yeast produces aldehydes, but they also produce alcohol, which is why we have liquor stores to begin with, because of the the effect of yeast on sugars. But you can see that ethanol, aka alcohol, results in inhibition of methionine synthase. So what this means is that if you're like me and many of my patients, and you have a genetic report where you have yellow or red in your MTHFR system, or your MTR or your MTRR, and you have a problem with yeast, well, the yeast is producing alcohol, and the alcohol is slowing down your MTR even more. So it's like having extra SNPs in a way. The environment is slowing down the gene, making the methylation cycle even less functional. So this is just more proof that when you clean up the gut and you get yeast under control and you improve digestion, you absolutely improve the methylation cycle. So this is alcohol from yeast inhibits methionine synthase and depletes glutathione. Some things, we want to make sure we have plenty of glutathione and that our methionine synthase is working very well. We've also, that was the alcohol side of it. The aldehydes that are produced, the acetaldehydes, also inhibit methionine synthase. They simply shut it off. So with this information in hand, what I want to reinforce with you is, when it comes down to looking at genetics, there's an enormous amount of value in understanding these pathways and knowing what the COMT does and what kind of things it breaks down, the sulfonyluretransferase genes as well, and not really all the genes that we're studying. It's important to know how they work, but we have to also look at the environment. And just like you plant a seed in the soil, it's how that seed grows in the soil that determines the health of that plant. And our bodies are no different. When we have methylation problems like COMT, MAOA, MTR, and sulfonyluretransferase, it doesn't mean that we can't be healthy. But what it does mean is that we're more sensitive to imbalances, especially those in our gut. And when you recognize that the gut produces phenols that slow down the COMT system, when the gut produces ethanol, alcohols, and aldehydes that interfere with methionine synthase and deplete glutathione, you get an idea that the gut is going to influence your genetics, because the gut is producing compounds that are leaking into your body 24/7. So in my office, we help patients deal with this process. As I've said before, it's not something that takes 6 months in most cases. In most cases, it resolves fairly quickly. You just have to do everything right. You have to have the right diet, the right advice, the right supplements, the right approach. We start off with a 10-day program that's very effective at doing that. And so I would encourage anybody out there listening who would like more information to reach out and contact me personally at my office, and certainly check out my website at BeyondMTHFR.com. And just thank you again for your time and attention, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much for watching this video and sharing it with your friends and family. I personally believe, as I'm sure you do as well, that educating ourselves about what it truly means to be healthy is the only way we're going to change healthcare. I have created a website as a resource for you. To take advantage of this information, navigate to www.beyondmthfr.com and take a look around. In addition to blogs and articles I have written, you will find a tab on the menu labeled Protocols. It is a growing list of tools that I use in my office to help support my patients. You will find background information on common health conditions, you will find a detailed supplement protocol, and you will find dietary advice to support the body's natural healing process. You will also have access to order recommended supplements at a discounted rate and have them shipped to your front door. I'm giving you the tools that I use in practice every day to help you overcome health challenges and live a happier, healthier life. I have done my best to give you that information, and you will find it on these protocol pages. If you are looking for more help than simply what supplements should you take or what diet should you follow, I'm inviting you to come to Boise and see me. Let me and my team and my staff take care of you. We have patients coming from all over the country and all over the area on a regular basis, and there's room for you too. Now, if coming all this way to Boise is too big of a commitment, then please pick up the phone or email my office. We can work together from a distance.